Big Tech had their hearing today in Congress, and it was actually pretty interesting. And I watched quite a bit of it while I was at the gym working out, just listening to it. And man, Jack Dorsey got absolutely obliterated. I mean, some of the answers that he gave and some of the examples that Congress was using to outline the hypocrisy of Twitter and their censorship policies is just absolutely stunning. So I'm going to talk about that, but I'm also going to talk more about my overall general thoughts in terms of tech and censorship in general, because I think there's a lot more to it that I want you guys to understand, because it's not as simple as just these tech companies blocking right-wing free speech. It's not that simple. But before we get into that, my name is Greg Foreman, and you're watching A Black Conservative Perspective. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share A Black Conservative Perspective, aka a liberal's worst nightmare. You can also follow me on Twitter at GForemanBCP. Let's get it. All right, guys, watch this video of Ted Cruz absolutely obliterating Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, during the congressional hearing today.
So, Mr. Dorsey, your ability is you have the power to force a media outlet. Let's be clear. The New York Post isn't just some random guy tweeting. The New York Post has the fourth highest circulation of any newspaper in America. The New York Post is over 200 years old. The New York Post was founded by Alexander Hamilton. And your position is that you can sit in Silicon Valley and demand of the media that you can tell them what stories they can publish, and you can tell the American people what reporting they can hear. Is that right?
No, this was a, every person, every account, every organization that signs up to Twitter agrees to a terms of service. Terms of service is
so published. Media outlets must genuflect and obey your dictates if they wish to be able to communicate with readers. Is that right?
No, not at all. We recognize an error in this policy, and specifically the enforcement.
You're still blocking their posts. You're still blocking their posts. Right now, today, you're blocking their posts.
We're not blocking the post. Anyone can tweet.
Can the New York Post post on their Twitter account?
If they go into their account.
No is your answer to that. No, unless they genuflect and agree with your dictates. Let me ask you something. You claimed it was because of a hacked materials policy. I find that facially highly dubious and clearly employed in a deeply partial way. Did Twitter block the distribution of the New York Times' story a few weeks ago that purported to be based on copies of President Trump's tax returns?
We didn't find that a violation of our terms of service in this policy in particular, because it was reporting about the material. It wasn't distributing the material.
Okay, well, that's actually not true. They posted what they purported to be original source materials, and federal law, federal statute makes it a crime, a federal felony, to distribute someone's tax returns against their knowledge. So that material was based on something that was distributed in violation of federal law, and yet Twitter gleefully allowed people to circulate that. But when the article was critical of Joe Biden, Twitter engaged in rampant censorship and silencing.
And again, we recognized errors in that policy. We changed it within 24 hours. This is.
But you're still blocking the New York Post. You haven't changed it.
We have changed it. They can log into their account, delete the original tweet. That was.
You forced a Politico reporter to take down his post about the New York Post as well. Is that correct?
Within that 24-hour period, yes. But we, as the policy has changed, anyone can tweet.
So Twitter takes the view you can censor the New York Post, you can censor Politico, presumably you can censor the New York Times or any other media outlet. Mr. Dorsey, who the hell elected you and put you in charge of what the media are allowed to report and what the American people are allowed to hear? And why do you persist in behaving as a Democratic super PAC, silencing views to the contrary of your political beliefs?
We're not doing that. And this is why I opened this hearing with calls for more transparency. We realize we need to earn trust more. We realize that more accountability is needed to show our intentions and to show the outcomes.
Thank you, Senator.
So I hear the concerns and acknowledge them, but we want to fix it with more transparency.
I mean, there's no excuses, Jack. There's no excuses. I mean, to this day, guys, the New York Post has not tweeted in like 2 weeks. They haven't tweeted since October 14th. Now, what Ted Cruz is talking about in terms of New York Post being locked out of their account is that they can log in. However, they have to remove the original tweet that locked out their account before they can get full access back to the account. And what Jack is basically saying is that, well, if they go and they do that, then they'll be free to tweet whatever they want. And in theory, according to him, if he reposts the link to the article, then it won't be censored. Now, Candace Owens went on Twitter and demonstrated that she had posted a screenshot of some text messages from the Hunter Biden story, and they ended up blocking that and locking out her account under their child exploitation policy or whatever, right? So Twitter is still actively censoring this Hunter Biden story, despite the backlash. So I think that Jack Dorsey here is being really disingenuous with his answers, and he's not really telling the whole truth in regards to why they're actually doing this. And this wasn't in the video, but earlier in the session, he was asked about how President Trump is being censored and fact-checked, but yet you have the Ayatollah and Iranian government officials tweeting hateful things and insightful tweets about Israel, denying the Holocaust. However, those posts either wasn't flagged at all, or there was a significant delay in which they were being flagged. Jack didn't have an answer for it. He didn't have an answer. He didn't have an explanation. And to me, I mean, the explanation is obvious. The explanation is that Twitter, who is especially guilty of this, has specifically targeted President Trump, and they've targeted what they define as right-wing conspiracies. Those are the two things they've targeted the most. And I think the problem is that, like Ted Cruz said, who the hell gave you the authority to dictate free speech? And some people might counter that and be like, well, Twitter's a private company. They can do whatever they want, as a publisher. And I would say that I do agree with that to a certain point. However, I think that from a practical standpoint, when you have world leaders and government officials using the platform to speak to the world, it, in my opinion, is practically a public forum. In my opinion. That's just my opinion. Guys, I'm almost a free speech absolutist. I think basically everything is good to go up until threats. You cannot make direct threats of violence against people. I do believe in that, censoring that type of stuff, and censoring groups that may be actively plotting terrorist attacks and things of that nature. I do believe that needs to be done. Right now, I think that should be a high bar for what you define as that, and there needs to be concrete evidence, as well as them working with the government in order to define who these groups are and to shut them down. But it has to be a very high bar for what you can define as that. That's my opinion on it. So I think that they do have an obligation to a certain extent. What we're currently saying is that there is a war on facts. What is a fact and what's not a fact? Because facts nowadays seem to be partisan in nature, even though they're not supposed to be partisan in nature. And what Twitter is basically doing is they are outlining whatever President Trump says that they don't agree with, that they don't feel is a fact. They are labeling that as misinformation, and they're censoring that. I don't agree with that. Even if President Trump lies, just like Joe Biden lies, just like Barack Obama lies, everybody lies. To me, a consequence of free speech is that you need to let the people decide what they want to believe. If the president lies about something, it's up to the people to choose whether or not they want to believe what the president is saying. Once you start trying to censor people and you start to try to malign what you believe is reality and how speech should and what speech is acceptable, now it starts to look like what President Trump, right, when he talks about election interference and the conspiracy theorists are saying, it starts to look like what they're saying is true. When Twitter goes out here and blocks a New York Post story, but yet they allow Trump's tax returns to be exposed, and then they say, well, the difference is that it's under the hacking policy. Well, obviously the New York Times hacked something to get those returns. Those returns are private information. Let's not forget the Melania Trump tapes that were recorded without her permission, that she didn't know. None of those things were blocked. But then when you block a story that's against Biden, and that could hurt Joe Biden. And then you say, well, it's under hack materials, but we're seeing other hack materials that hurt President Trump not being blocked. People gonna call you out on bullshit because it is bullshit. And this is why I think Jack is making a mistake by censoring anything that's not extreme. When you start just censoring the president, be censored, even if he lies, when you start just censoring the president to censor the president, or to censor stories that may or may not be true, and it all looks like it's in favor of the Democrats and the left, you only thing you do is that you add fuel to the fire of the conspiracies. That's what you do. You're actually not making it better. You're actually making it worse because you're providing hard evidence that the media is in line with the Democrat Party and the left. Which, I mean, at this point, I don't understand how anybody can deny that. And guys, I'm the type of person, I've told you guys multiple times, I consume all news across the spectrum. I consume progressive news. I consume center-left news, moderate news, center-right news, far-right news. I get my news from all spectrums because I want to make sure that I get the truth and that I can get my information and decide for myself what I want to believe. And that's how it should be. And I encourage other people to do that. When you start to censor people to that point, what you're actually doing is you're encouraging them to get all of their news from one source. You're encouraging them to say, you know what, I'm going to stop watching CNN. I'm going to stop watching MSNBC. I'm only going to watch Fox News. I'm only going to read Breitbart. I'm only going to read right-wing news because that's the only news that I can trust because all these other news stations are so biased that I just can't trust them. And again, you're helping add fuel to that fire. And it works the same way. Why people just like, oh, I'm not going to watch Fox News. I'm not going to read Breitbart. I'm not going to read the New York Post. I'm only going to watch, I don't know, what do liberals watch? MSNBC, CNN, TYT. I mean, if you're a socialist, right? I'm only going to watch progressive news. It works both ways. And guys, if any of you still have Netflix, right? There's a documentary called The Social Dilemma. Now, I don't have Netflix. I always use somebody else's account because I'm freeloading. But that is an excellent documentary to watch to get a better perspective on what's going on with social media, guys. And how social media has driven us to be more polarized as people because the algorithm is helping drive us to view information the algorithm feels that we want to see. So if you're on the far left and you like looking at far left information, that's all you look at, the algorithm is going to keep feeding you that. Or if you're on the right and you like looking at far right information, the algorithm is going to keep feeding you that. And when you see that these companies start to align with one side or the other, and that some of your information that you like to consume is being blocked, again, like I said, that's going to feed more into the conspiracies, and it's going to create a feedback loop that is very dangerous, and it might rear its head after this election, depending on what the results are. It could happen either way. It could happen either way. So when we're having this conversation about tech and tech censorship, it's really important for people to understand kind of what the issues are. There's a disagreement among what is a fact and what's not a fact. The fact checkers that's supposed to be checking the facts don't even get the facts right. Right? And the way they do it is obviously in a way, and I'm telling you, this is somebody that consumes media across all spectrums. They obviously have a left-leaning bias. Just like when President Trump says he believes the Obama administration spied on him, they automatically label that as false. When you actually had context, we all know that the FBI did investigate President Trump's campaign. And again, this was under the Obama administration. Now, did President Obama sign off on it? Who knows? But considering everything that's been going on, if President Trump wants to have the opinion that the Obama administration spied on him, and we know that the FBI was investigating his campaign, I don't see what's wrong with that. I don't see how you can rate that as just a lie when it's actually really not. It's really more of an opinion. The media treats it as if it's an outright lie, as if the man's just pulling it out his ass and he has no context for it. Because they love to play this semantics game where they say, well, investigating and spying is not really the same thing. That's how they like to play the game. But then they give Joe Biden the benefit of the doubt, and he's never fact checked. The left-wing media has completely ignored the Hunter Biden story. They won't cover it. I mean, the guy went on Fox News, did an interview. Again, whether or not you believe it's true or not, it doesn't matter. That's not what we're talking about. At the very least, it's your obligation to cover it. We've seen them cover Russia, something that has been debunked 1,000 times for the last 3 years as if it was fact. And we know it's made up. They covered that and treated that legitimately, but they won't sniff the Hunter Biden story. When you see that type of discrepancy between media coverage when it comes to right-wing and left-wing information, that is not going to sit well with people. And you are going to create more and more and more conspiracy theories, which really at this point, I would say it's a conspiracy for you not to believe that there's a conspiracy from the media to get President Trump out of office. Because to me, it's very obvious that's what's going on. And I don't feel like that's a conspiracy to say. And even if it's a conspiracy theory, a lot of times that doesn't necessarily mean it's false. That just means it hasn't been proven. That's all it means. So conspiracy theories should not be blocked. That's why I say that if they're going to censor, it has to be something that's extreme, that has a high bar, that is an imminent threat when it comes to violence or some type of planning of a mass shooting, somebody planning on doing something that's going to harm somebody, some type of threat. That is what you should be trying to censor. Everything else should be free game for the most part. And you just have to deal with the consequences of free speech, because ultimately at the end of the day, that is what liberty is. Liberty is about having choice and letting the people decide what they want to believe. It's about the battle and debate of ideas. Some of it, to their credit, is the algorithm. If you guys watch The Social Dilemma, you'll understand more about this. The algorithm is designed for people to see what the algorithm think that people want to see, so they can keep people looking at the app, right? They're competing for your views. They're competing for eyes on the screen. The more you look at the content, the more they can throw ads at you. So they're incentivized to throw things at you that you like. And everything nowadays has become more and more and more political. So it could just be a natural consequence of the algorithm. Definitely some of it is that. But I think with Twitter and Facebook, they're definitely prioritizing censoring American right-wing information and news. And they're prioritizing that. And I think that's shown by the fact that they always try to fact check Donald Trump. They always try to censor him, but they fail to do so with other world leaders who say things that are just as wrong or incendiary as President Trump. In this situation, guys, like, I'm not one of those conservatives that believe that the government can't provide any solutions. No, in this situation, we definitely need more government oversight. I think a good idea would be to establish some type of freedom of speech score that all social media companies are kind of assessed on in terms of what they're blocking, what type of content they're blocking, and at which rate they're blocking it. And I think that that's something they need to look into at a government level that's bipartisan, which we can see what Google's blocking, what Facebook's blocking, what Twitter's blocking. And that way, we can have more transparent information as the consumer to decide if they're being fair in terms of how they're censoring us. And if we feel that it's not, then we may transition over to another platform. And that also is a private sector solution as well, making it more transparent so that other forms of competition can come into the market and compete that are more friendly to free speech. So that's my opinion on that. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.